Jonathan Anderson hails Jimin as Dior's living muse. Paris Fashion Week turns into a global phenomenon. Could one appearance change the direction of an entire fashion house? At Paris Fashion Week, that question echoed across the Jardin des Tuileries as Dior unveiled its Spring-Summer 2026 collection, under the leadership of its newly appointed creative director, Jonathan Anderson. But while industry insiders were bracing themselves for Anderson's debut, it was Jimin of BTS who transformed the evening into a cultural milestone that reached far beyond the fashion elite. Making his first major public appearance since completing mandatory military service in June 2025, Jimin arrived in Paris like a man who understood the weight of his moment. Fans from across continents had already flooded the venue hours before the show, some camping overnight with Dior banners and BTS light sticks, chanting his name in a dozen different languages. When he finally stepped onto the scene, the frenzy felt less like the entrance of a guest and more like the arrival of Dior's very heartbeat. Jonathan Anderson, already tasked with proving his vision for Dior's women's collections, seemed to recognize this immediately. According to insiders, Anderson was overheard praising Jimin backstage as the embodiment of modern luxury and confidence, a declaration that carried the weight of anointing Jimin not just as an ambassador, but as Dior's living muse. His subtle but symbolic gesture, liking Harper's Bazaar Japan's post featuring Jimin at the show, was interpreted by fans and fashion editors alike as a deliberate acknowledgement that Jimin stood at the core of this new Dior chapter. The symbolism couldn't be clearer. This was Dior at a crossroads, a heritage brand with French roots ushering in a new era defined not by Parisian aristocracy, but by global inclusivity. And at the center of that transformation stood Jimin, whose journey from Seoul to Paris represented not just a personal evolution, but a tectonic shift in cultural influence. Could it be that Dior under Anderson is consciously positioning Jimin as the face of modern couture, bridging continents, industries, and generations? Inside the venue, the energy was electric. Celebrities like Blackpink's Jisoo and Hollywood icon Charlize Theron sat front row, adding to the glitz. Yet, as one American journalist remarked, they were all stars, but Jimin was the sun. Every camera lens found him. Every whisper circled back to his presence. Even as Anderson's debut collection was unveiled with crisp tailoring and romantic drapery, the applause felt amplified by Jimin's aura, as though the entire event had fused Dior's rebirth with his reemergence. This wasn't Jimin's first brush with Dior. His appointment as global ambassador in January 2023 had already made headlines, followed by his dazzling front-row appearance at Dior's Fall-Winter 2023-24 menswear show alongside Robert Pattinson and David Beckham. But this, his triumphant return to Paris post-military service, was different. This was history folding back on itself, with Jimin proving not only his enduring star power, but also his ability to elevate Dior's story into something universal. Global media wasted no time declaring the event a phenomenon. American outlets praised how Jimin's return had turned Paris Fashion Week into a cultural summit, while Korean broadcasters highlighted the national pride attached to seeing him honored by one of the world's most iconic brands. On social media, #JiminatDior'S26 dominated trends worldwide, while fans shared side-by-side comparisons of his earlier Dior moments and his new era, noting how his aura had matured into something even more commanding. But perhaps the most pressing question lingering in the aftermath was this: if Jonathan Anderson has indeed crowned Jimin as Dior's living muse, what comes next? Will Jimin's presence become the centerpiece of Dior's global campaigns? Could this partnership go beyond ambassador status into the realm of creative collaboration, where Dior collections themselves are shaped with Jimin in mind? For now, what remains certain is that October 1st at the Jardin des Tuileries was not just another date in fashion's calendar. It was the day Paris Fashion Week turned into a global phenomenon, the day Dior's new era found its muse, and the day Jimin and BTS reminded the world that his influence doesn't fade with time. It evolves, it deepens, and it reshapes history itself. American media amplified the narrative. The Washington Post framed Jimin's presence as a cultural crossover so powerful it eclipsed even Dior's own debut, while Harper's Bazaar US went further, declaring him the living definition of Dior's modern era. For Jonathan Anderson, whose appointment carried enormous pressure to preserve Dior's heritage while introducing innovation, Jimin's presence gave his debut show a resonance that stretched beyond fabric and silhouettes. It provided something fashion rarely achieves: a global unifying story. Entertainment Tonight noted how Anderson's words about Jimin, modern luxury and confidence, were replayed as if they were lines from a presidential speech. Why? Because those words weren't just about clothes, they were about influence. Jimin was no longer being discussed as a pop star dabbling in fashion. He was being positioned as the cornerstone of Dior's future identity. French outlets like Le Monde and Madame Figaro celebrated the moment with national pride, framing Jimin's arrival as the perfect symbol of Paris's openness to global artistry. Madame Figaro wrote, "Paris has always been the capital of fashion, but in Jimin's aura, we see how Paris reinvents itself as the capital of culture." Korean media reported the moment with emotional undertones, emphasizing Jimin's journey from military service to global fashion spotlight in just a few short months. SBS called it a cultural renaissance. Outside the Jardin des Tuileries, thousands of fans filled the surrounding streets with chants of Jimin, echoing louder than Parisian traffic. Some carried Dior shopping bags as banners, others waved Korean flags, and many more live-streamed the moment to millions across social media. One French fashion blogger compared the crowd to a rock concert disguised as a couture show, marveling at how Jimin had transformed a luxury event into something resembling a world tour. Social media data revealed Jimin generated more engagement in 24 hours than the rest of the celebrity guest list combined. "We expected Jimin to make an impact," one Dior insider admitted, "but we didn't expect him to redefine the metrics." This led to even more speculation. Could Dior be preparing to dedicate an entire campaign, perhaps even a signature fragrance or capsule line, to Jimin, now hailed as their living muse? Analysts called him a once-in-a-generation figure whose cultural impact transcends markets. One source put it perfectly: "When you have a muse who not only embodies your creative vision but mobilizes millions around the world, you don't just dress him, you build with him." Paris itself seemed to bend around his presence. Local newspapers described how traffic near the venue came to a standstill as fans gathered, turning the space into an open-air arena. Taxi drivers joked that Paris Fashion Week had turned into Jimin Week. On JTBC, anchors called Jimin not only Dior's muse, but Korea's ambassador to the world. Competitor brands like Chanel, Gucci, and Prada were reportedly re-evaluating their K-pop strategies. "This isn't just an ambassador relationship anymore," wrote Business of Fashion. "This is a cultural monopoly." Clips of Jimin bowing respectfully to Anderson backstage spread across TikTok and Twitter, reinforcing his image as a man who embodies both humility and grandeur. Anderson himself reportedly told colleagues, "Jimin elevates the brand beyond fashion." That phrase became a declaration of intent. With Jimin, Dior isn't just showing clothes anymore. It's rewriting what it means to hold cultural capital in the 21st century. As the night settled over Paris, one truth remained. The Dior show was no longer remembered solely as Jonathan Anderson's debut, but as the evening Jimin turned Fashion Week into a global spectacle. Even those who came for Dior's artistry left with one name etched into memory: Jimin for Dior. The equation is undeniable. Dior has heritage, craftsmanship, and prestige. Jimin brings something rarer: the power to unite Paris, Seoul, and New York in a single heartbeat. Together, they are not just showing fashion. They are shaping culture, commanding attention, and defining what modern luxury means to a generation that demands both elegance and authenticity. If Jimin is Dior's living muse today, could tomorrow see him immortalized as the man who defined Dior's new era?